very soon afterwards, my regional officer who's saying, there's been a question in the House of Representatives as to what the hell's going on with your airport emergency plan, so and so. Can you explain this? I won't mention his name, but he's known to be a tad short on occasions. And I said, well, it so happens I have spoken to the pilot of the aeroplane you saw it, and I've asked him to come here and listen to the tape. He did come over, but he released a big notice to the paper. Everybody was in on the act about this sort of rescue fire circus, which annoyed me no end at that stage. And so I said to him, what did you tell us was where the crash? He said, just on the airfield side of the estuary. I said, no, you didn't. He told us it was 3 miles southwest. I said, 3 miles southwest happens to be priority, just back there on the hill. And the only way to get there was to go all the way down and come in behind. As you well know, sort of what was now Tamati Drive would be very useful on those occasions. And so I asked him to listen to the tape, in which the tape said, second time, that in fact it was on the airfield side of the estuary. So I said, I want you to, make a statement to the paper and withdraw it, a statement. Otherwise I'll release the tape to the press. And he said, okay, so he did his bit, and I rang up the regional man and explained to him, and it went off to the minister, so whoever it was that he wanted to go to hear about it. But that's the sort of ramifications that sort of pop up when these sort of things carry on. But we had another little one which has had another bit more humorous than this. We had an annual practice crash, which you're supposed to have, and then luckily in my time everybody turned out, all the emergency services actually turned out. Today they tend to be paper exercises. And at any rate, we had arranged for 46 intermediate school pupils as the casualties down on the southeast corner, down past the aircraft down there. And we also had 6 videos with a fire which was arranged down there by the fire chief, with thousands of litres of contaminated fuel and tyres. I'd arranged OTF contact with the fire chief to start this off at the appropriate moment. We had a friendship come through, was going to Wairau, and spoke to him, and I said, told him before he left, if you're happy with the weather and everything, Wairau, let me know. And I said, we'll do our exercise, because it's going to take a good half an hour to clear this up before we come back. He said, that's fine. So he called Wairau. Yeah, Gisborne's okay, the weather's okay, I'll carry on. So I said, I called up on the radio, which I'd only test 5 minutes before, the fire chief. Murphy was at it again. Wouldn't work. Nothing what I did. But plan B, berry cartridges, pistols, you know those, Cyril. We still had them in the tower then. That's probably why they removed them, because I rushed outside. The idea was fire red, if nothing happens for a while. Fire the green, everything's okay. Great. So I fire off the green, rush downstairs, get the coordinator vehicle, put my coordinator vest on, put my hard hat on, roar off down to the site to coordinate before the police arrive, all the things I should do. Bad luck. A freshening southerly arrived, no rain, damn it. And of course the airfield was very dry. And it was now on fire. The grass right in front of the tower was moving a long way. And I've got a little note here that my staff car mats, they raced out with their cars, used their car mats to try and beat up this grass fire. It didn't work. So they rushed back upstairs, and of course I had a deputy taken over, and I was still down there, so he was talking to me. And well, we had a bit of luck because the Bayview, who were the volunteer firers, turned up a little bit afterwards, and they always reported into the fire station to get their directions to go on the field to make sure they didn't get mixed up with everything else that was happening. And good lads they were. Fire! They raced out, put out the fire. So my blood, or whatever, was saved from the airfield going entirely in smoke. So that was one of the problems, but I did come up against a big problem in that when you have 46 people and casualties lying on the ground, all made up, all very good stuff, all being videoed. And what you can't do is just drive your ambulance vehicles or your rescue fire vehicles, and of course you've got the original one from the airfield, plus 3 from town, or whatever, I think it's 4 in total. They can't just drive through long grass, because there's a lot of children in here. So they had to go and peep their way sort of through to find people. Everybody learned a very serious lesson, because I said nobody goes past this point, so I knew where they were, all the survivors. And they sort of found ways through to get and put the fire in, and it was a hell of a fire by the stage. But that was a trick, and we put that out. But I handed everything over to the police, and that was about the end of the line, really. The worst part of that was that when they went to process them, somebody managed to wipe the videos.
Oh, gee.
The most aggravating, because I saw the 6 individual ones, and the debrief afterwards, and they were really good. The only thing that was a bit off colour was me running around in my shorts and a coordinator's skirt, which was wet here, so didn't look very well. But there's another thing, the same style of thing you can have when you have accidents and practices. We had a crash at sea, coordinated by the harbour master, which is part of his role. 2 tugs are there, put to sea, one goes immediately, races out to do what it can, because they'd had experience with a lodestar not too long ago before my time. One tug goes immediately, and then one other one waits until all the emergency people turn up, the firemen and the St John's people and anybody else that can help. And as that goes off, we weren't sure of survivors, because we just didn't know. This was friendship was part of, I can't remember all the numbers, but sadly, they've got the fishing club, isn't it? What they call it? The
Yes.
Napier motor fishing club, Interact people. They were all part of the game, and they had already roared out, and they were racing out and forming in line and doing all the things they should do. And the control is under the harbour master with the people there at the Game Fishing Club. And then some check was made on the numbers that we agreed that people might have been in, and totaled them all up, because you have to do the number on board you got, and we were now able to confirm it. The senior sergeant was not amused. Again, not captain. Because we were 1 missing. And he said, what I will not have on my exercises is a casualty on an exercise. So he sent all the game fishing boats out again on a big line ahead sweep out in the bay. And we found out this chap picked him up and brought him back after further sea sweep had been ordered, and this survivor found, who was been floating around for some time now, and his kit, it's what they call diving gear and kit and everything else. And he said, well, what had happened, he had been dropped over the side by the boat, a small tugboat, pilot boat, thrown over the side, and he said a boat came up to him and helped him aboard. He just popped in and sat down, and he said to this chap, "That's very good service." Good, he said, "I've hardly had a swum a couple of strokes at all." He said, "And I'm being rescued." And the fisherman said, "Well, why?" Well, this pseudo-survivor said, "Well, aren't you here to pick me up?" He said, "No, I'm just out here fishing." So he threw it back over the side. And that was the story behind how they picked up this lone fisherman and threw him back in the water, and they found him and brought him back, and the senior sergeant was a hell of a lot happier than he was before. So that was another way of difficulty, but I think that there's only one more. I may as well finish it off while I'm on it. We had another one, an annual crash exercise. Apparently I used to think of these fiendish things. It was at the threshold of runway 25, which runs along by the main road and of course by the railway. And there was no coordinator available, which in what I was testing was the fact I could have been on leave from Timbuktu or anywhere. And it had to work without me, and I felt sure it would. So our scenario included the people on board this aeroplane, which was only about 6, plus another 4 of a car that had been hit, which made it a bit more difficulty, and mixed up with road traffic and controlling the road. It was quite an interesting exercise. Everybody learned a hell of a lot. And I was only there as the big large notice on me saying, "I'm here, the company rep." And I had all the information about the people on board. That was all I was doing. And then later on, it got into the press. I was trying to find the paper today and I couldn't, damn it, in one of those safe places. A doctor complained he had risked life and limb, I say this from a loose statement, in jumping over a barbed wire boundary fence to assist at an exercise. And, dare I say, again, he was not amused. And so, as I say, that was the end of that. And but that's some of the most things that I find stick in my mind for the 12 years that I was here. There are a couple of other things, but we won't talk about those. Thank you very much. But
so you didn't have any aircraft coming in with top dressers with a bit of fencing wire all hooked up?
all those things happened. We had 2 or 3 aeroplanes arrive with smoke in the cockpit. Mitsubishi's had a couple.
Yes.
I don't like to name things, so we won't worry about that, but they've moved on. There was even an aerial mapping aeroplane on a practice display and short landing on a day before the air show. Sort of burst the old tyre, and that cost us a bit of time. Had to be removed and repaired. And there were several other smaller incidents which we won't go into, but yeah.
Just part of the course.
Yeah, they were done. There's a little bit of history which implies the role of the aerodrome superintendent as he was then. As I mentioned, under the Civil Aviation Act, I could act for the director. We had closed the cross runway 25 because it had been too wet, and everybody was getting agitated. Nor'westers were arriving and aeroplanes were having diverse with crosswind and things were not happy. So the engineer, who shall be nameless, came out and said, "Surely we can open the fail up. It must be all right." And I said, "Yes." I said, "We probably could, but you're supposed to test it. And to test it, you have to have one of these bars. I don't know what their name are, but you stick them on a truck and put a load of stuff on the truck and penetrate the surface, and from that you can work out the single wheel loading. And you have to do that, otherwise your aeroplanes might, do things like sink." So, and he said that's, I think it was Queenstown when they set it up there, it was a long way away, and he said, "It won't be back for about 6 months." And he said, "We've got to get this thing open, otherwise we're in dire straits." So, by this time, I might add, we had 3 friendships circling the bay, because everybody said it was going to be opened. But nobody had actually issued the certificate, because the engineering people were responsible for that, not me. So he said, for God's sake, I said, we'll come out, we'll go out in the vehicle. So we went to the vehicle, raced down the runway, stopped down there, and looked at it and he said, it doesn't look too bad. I said, well, you look at the sides, because it had a good crown, it tended to be a bit soft. I said, we'll have to be very careful about this. But I said, I will show you, and pardon me for the video, but I said, yes. Yes, I'll take a friendship. And he said, thank you for that. Went home and issued the certificate. And 3 aeroplanes landed, 3 friendships. Sadly, one of them had Mr. Muldoon on board.
Oh,
Had a vital, that's why they were hanging around. He had some board and he had a pile of other people as well. And my instructions to the tower was that they would land, do about a 30-degree turn left and a full right U-turn to keep as near the crown as possible and come back. First did it wonderfully. The captain rushed up the stairs, so thanks for that. And the next one landed, of course, with a certain personage on board and turned around but didn't really listen, and suddenly realised that he was now not going to be able to do a right turn because it felt soft. And this other was a Czech captain, and he said, I heard what you said. He called the captain and gave him the microphone, and I said, tell him what you think you can authorise him to do. And he said, use full takeoff power on one engine and pull it around, which he did very successfully. It came round, the mud, slush and dirt all over that friendship. You've never seen so much of it. But he succeeded, as I thought he would, because underneath it's just hard, it's a seabed. It's only the top stuff which is a mess. And he turned around and came back and another one landed. So that was a day I felt that one could state as being
An engineer.
well, yeah, that's another quite. I was a fitter and turner, but it's not quite grossly associated with single wheel loadings. So I think that's about enough.
Flick.
Yeah.
And if you were down near the ground, that's okay. The wheels will hit the ground and
No, the wings
rectify.
are-
But if you were 20 feet, you cartwheel. You're gone. You know.
Could you just have a
My policy with a Kitty Hawk was to land the wheels on every time. I never tried to do a 3-pointer.
Oh, did you not?
I just used to fly at 100 miles an hour and
Yeah, get the
they
wheels
stayed
on.
on.
And set the throttle.
I pushed the stick forward slightly.
Yeah, that'll be right.
gentleman could put your elbows on the bar
Yeah.
like this.
You'll get up nice and close then.
That will bring you
Sorry.
bring you closer to
Oh, I
the.
see.
Nice and
Brooklyn.
close, you see.
That will bring you
It's a
closer.
very cuddly sort of.
Oh, this is very good.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
Yeah, can we get an autographed copy of this, can we? Yeah.
Yes.
The acoustics in here are not the best, so the closer we get to
Yeah,
the
that's
mic,
all
the
right.
cuts
That's
down the
all right.
noise.
Yeah. We'll come back next year if it doesn't work this time.
Yeah, that sounds good
Don't,
too.
don't promise anything.
I don't take that because unfortunately I've just done nearly 100 interview recordings
Yes.
of the earthquake archives,
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
and I can't go back to one of them now.
No, they're gone.
It's interesting the bit in the newspaper about the young lad who was in the hospital and they thought he was dead. Was that one of your interviews, was it?
No, this is they've got that. Somebody's written in that. And said-
Yes, yes, they thought he
in
was
the
dead and
paper.
they put him on the ground and covered him up and he was...
He was
Oh, there's others too that they didn't know they were there, and somebody was looking for his girlfriend and happened to walk across the roof of the theatre, up at the hospital, and the woman screamed because of the weight on, and they discovered her there. Otherwise, they wouldn't have. Because all these things have turned up.
Yeah, years ago I worked in the bank in Auckland and one of the blokes in Auckland had been in...
First,
Yeah,
you go first.
yeah.
Good on
You go first and I'll go second then.
One other thing, don't tap on this because it comes through the mic.
Oh, it makes a noise, yes.
But I'll try and catch your hands if you start doing something or other, so I'm not being awful when I grab hold of your hand.
Yes,
or
well that's
something,
all
you know
right.
what
Yeah,
it's all
well, it's going to be an
about.
exciting...
Yes, it is, I tell you.
Yeah.
Exciting.
It's archival
Should put some rum in
stuff.
Yeah, should have done, yes,
Right.
that's right. Yeah.
Rolling.
Okay, away you go.
I'm Charles Bowley, and I was in the RAAF from 1941 to 1944, and I flew Kitty Hawks in New Guinea as part of my, or as all of my overseas experience, and had some exciting experiences, mainly dive bombing and strafing, but didn't actually do any air fighting. So that was my experience up in the islands. But more after I came back from New Guinea in 1945, they sent me to Point Cook to do an instructor's course. So I flew Wirraways there, and then went out to a place called Parkes, where I instructed from the back seat of a Wirraway for 6 months. And one day the chief flying instructor, who was a mate of mine by the name of Lou Spence, a very famous Australian pilot, he called me and he said, "Would you like another crack, Charles?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "If you want to get back into action, you'll have to join the Fleet Air Arm." So I went down to Melbourne and was interviewed, and I got onto the first course of Australian pilots who transferred to the RANVR, which didn't have any pilots at all. So I spent the best part of a year flying on carriers, Seafires, which was fairly exciting, especially my first experience of a Seafire landing on HMS Indomitable off the coast of New South Wales. I came in a little bit high, and the batsman gave me a wave off. The plane stalled, the wing dug into the deck, and the plane just cartwheeled over the side into the water, with me on board, of course. So I clambered out on the wing, thinking I'd got away with it, and next minute the plane sank, and I was being hauled down head first. Well, it wasn't to be my end that day, because somebody lent me their helmet and had press studs on. And fortunately I was able to get the helmet off and kick up to the surface and break out my dinghy, and was rescued by a destroyer, and spent a very uncomfortable afternoon spewing up seawater. And then of course I had to repeat the whole exercise next morning, which wasn't so easy, to go up in a plane and go through the whole rigmarole. But I got away with it and ended up my Fleet Air Arm experience with 27 deck landings, and I was seconded to the 801 Squadron, which was a British Navy squadron, which subsequently had Harrier jump jets. And I said to my wife one day, "I'm an old boy of that squadron. It went to the Falklands War." So I was quite pleased to have that association with the British Fleet Arm. But my early career in the Air Force was mainly staff piloting, that is, flying ferry battles for 18 months. And I must have got about 500 hours up on battles without any mistakes. So they sent me to a fighter OTU. When I got there at Mildura, I said, "I think I'm at the wrong place because I haven't flown the Wirraway." So they gave me 2 hours, 2 one-hour trips in Wirraways, mainly circuits and bumps, and then put me on the course. It's a wonder to me at the time that I survived the Wirraway part of the course, because I only had a month on Wirraways and then had to go and fly the Kitty Hawks, which of course, being a single-seater fighter, you don't do anything but taxi it around. So there, that was an experience, taking off in the Kitty Hawk for the first time. I think most of us thought the Kitty Hawk was flying us rather than us in charge of the Kitty Hawk. Anyway, I'll leave it to someone else now to carry on the story. Max here.
There you go.
Max McEwen. I'm 79 years old, and when I look back at my Air Force flying time, I am amazed that I did the things that I did. But I was one of tens of thousands of young blokes who were enlisted in the Air Force and were taught to fly. Now, can you imagine an 18, 19-year-old ex-bank clerk flying an aeroplane? Well, it's beyond credibility when I look back at it, but at the time it was most enjoyable, and it was really the most vital time of my life. it was not the happiest time of my life, but it was, I think the terminology was a character forming. I ended up flying Kitty Hawks, as did Charles has mentioned, and they were, initially they flew you. The Kitty Hawk initially, when you took off first time solo, it gathered you up from behind and moved you off down that airstrip very quickly, and you were alert and you were airborne, and I don't think you were going to look over the side until you got to about 10,000 feet, and then you sorted things out and eventually became proficient at flying the aeroplane. It was interesting, the flying was...
So you reckon you did an instrument takeoff sort of style, did you?
There was a lot of prayer involved and sweaty hands and clenched buttocks. It was one, so it was character forming.
Yep.
The interesting thing was that the more you flew, of course, the better you became at it. Until eventually, when I finished with the squadron, I flew 50 operational missions up in the islands, in the Western Drive through New Guinea and into Borneo. My final assessment was above average, which differed completely from my first initial assessment on Tiger Moth, which was rough and inaccurate. Probably the flying was still rough and inaccurate, but there was a process of staying alive which put you above average because you made the grade in a sense. As I said, it was the most vital time of my life, and it still intrigues me that there was this young bloke, along with tens of thousands of others, who were taught to fly and use the aircraft as a weapon. The flying became incidental. You just had to fly, but then you had to use the aircraft as a weapon of destruction. And there's one thing I did learn. I was saying to the blokes previously, you learn as you go along. And one thing in the P-40, you don't do a stall turn at 20,000 feet with a 1,000-pound bomb under the belly. You just don't do that. I tried it once. I tried it once, and halfway through it, I realised it. And
so you didn't lose your bomb. You didn't actually.
No, I recovered from where I was and went on and did the business. I can remember this particular effort was on Sarong, which was a big Japanese seaplane base, and there were 36 P-40s involved in the raid, and you can't put 36 P-40s on the one target all at once. So there were different levels and different timings. And I can remember going down in the dive and I could see all these twinkles, these little wee twinkles of white pin spots. And of course that was the gun shooting at us, you know. And I can remember saying to myself at the time, they're trying to kill me. My mum wouldn't like this. You know? And I can remember raising the bead on the front sight, you know, and just pulling the trigger and blasting away with the 6.5s. But the flying, as I said, was incidental. You did the job and you got the hell out of it, and you always felt, well, relieved when you got away from the target area, and eventually you got home to base, and then you relaxed. And all combat flying was, well, wasn't combat flying, but strike flying, dive bombing, ground strafing, very tiring. You'd come to the end of your day and you were absolutely stuffed. And we were on benzodrine tablets on the long trips. You'd have a benzodrine tablet before target and one after target, so that when you got back home you were sufficiently alert to do the quick rejoin, which I think the Air Force now called buzz and break. But this was a defensive landing operation. You got down very quickly and you were covered by the flight behind you, or you covered the flight underneath you. So you had to be